Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack. Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host, David Allen Lucas, author of Very Crazy Things and dealing with a story that I just really would like to throw into a trash can. That's being nice. But with me today is my lovely co-host,
Kathleen Kayembe, paranormal romance writer under the pen name Kaseka and Vita, and currently doing NaNoWriMo. So,
Yay.
I might be insane today, so you know.
Well, you've been insane the entire month. It's NaNoWriMo.
I might be more insane.
Yes.
This is your warning.
Okay. But we still love NaNoWriMo.
Lee Savage, author of Erotic Paranormal Romance and Erotic Romance with a Twist, and under the name Carrie Lee Williams, children's books.
Which is always an interesting twist between those two genres.
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. My book Dog Park is for sale on Amazon. Check it out. And yeah, I'm sorry hear about your writing project, David. That sounds terrible.
That's okay. Yeah, the drawings you've been making for me help.
Oh, well, good. Anything I can do to help.
Yeah. I'm Melanie Kulaney. I haven't actually written at all this month, at least, not for actual writing, because, I've been busy trying to work on my earn a living job.
Yes. She's the scientist of the group. And today we have returning with us two favorite guests we had back in July, Jean and Blair Leggett. Did I do it? Did I get it right?
Yes. That's
Yay!
awesome.
This is with OneMoreStoryGames.com. One More Story Games, we'll let them describe a little more about it, but is a online digital publisher of stories that work like games. And I'm going to let Jean take it from there. But check out our previous episode back, I believe, July 13th, if I remember correct, when it aired. Definitely July. And you can get a whole big background on who this is and why we have them on board. So, Jean, just real quick.
Sure. Blair and I have spent the last 22 months with a ragtag crew building software with writers in mind to enter the games industry. And one of the best ways to sort of describe what we've built is they are games you read, books you play. I think in a nutshell is what we're trying to communicate to the player. So if you really love to read books, but you also play the occasional social game, you'll probably really like what we're trying to do. Over the course of that time, we've been so focused on developing the engine that now we're looking to develop the content. And that's where we've been wooing and romancing writers all over the place in all genres. And I'm looking at you. And because what we find is the majority of gamers, most people don't realize, are women. So it's about a 50-50 split of who actually plays games. And the largest demographic is women over 30. I really want to create a space that is intelligent and fun and creative in terms of the content that women gamers are getting, and that's why we're going to writers.
And having played one of your games, in fact, today I finally got on to play. I finally had a moment to do it. And if anybody out there is like, well, I can't write a game. I don't know a game. Did you ever play with the idea of writing a choose-your-own-adventure? I would definitely put this in that type of category. It's not exactly choose-your-own-adventure, but it's just about as much fun.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's for adults.
And you have more choices that don't end in death.
Yes.
I like that.
Well, since our last time that we spoke to you, I had really hoped that we could tell you publicly who we're working with, and I can't believe how long it takes to get a contract signed.
Oh, yes.
I'm super excited because the contract's going to be signed fairly soon, and we'll be able to tell you who are 20 million novelists. They have sold 20 million copies of their novel.
Wow.
And they've had some television shows adapted from their works. So I'm kind of hinting, and I'll let you scratch your brains on that. But we're super excited because we're going to be adapting a couple of their earlier novels into story games. And since July, we've actually spent the summer teaching 10 to 16-year-olds how to use the engine. And within an hour, they were into the guts of it. It was amazing. And for those of you who are thinking, you know what, I'm a writer, I'm really great with words, how do you expect me to come up with illustrations and photos? We're making it really super easy. So I don't know if you've ever looked at a really cool picture, maybe it's like a man sitting at a bar or whatever, we can actually put a little hover and you can click on that man and you can actually have a conversation with him. So you could be using real photos and you don't have to worry about hiring an illustrator because it's very flexible what we're trying to give to writers.
So, Lee, if your character goes walking into the bar for one of your erotic romances, actually, I'd be curious to see how that conversation went.
Well, we may be speaking to a well-known stock photography company that also has a series of erotica photos. Most people do not realize they have this. Which I was quite excited to hear about. Excited in that sense of things. Well, mostly because I think a lot of erotica writers they would love. Imagine interactive. I'm going to say 50 Shades because that's everybody's point of reference. But imagine interactive 50 Shades, but available to you as an erotica writer, and no one else is really doing that in the games market. We just need a handful of really talented writers in that space to really help us take off. And I think by landing the author that we have, I think other authors will come. So having talented people published alongside those multi-million selling writers, it's a really amazing opportunity for, especially as a startup, right?
Oh, certainly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had a question. Speaking, you're branching out into all genres. Speaking specifically of erotica and some of the other genres, do you have any controls or any way to, in the future, add controls to keep children only accessing sites, stories that are appropriate for children?
Absolutely. There's no way I would put the children's stuff next to the erotica. That would be that's just wrong. No, we're definitely planning to have general romance, like your PG romance in the same category as everything else. We'd like to have a separate kids-only portal. There might even be a portal where it's kids making games for other kids. Cool. So you have to be an author that's under 18 and that maybe you only make like a 5 or 10 minute story, but you make a whole bunch of them. And started keeping that simple and encouraging kids to write as well. And then with the erotica, there's a very fine line. I think everybody knows there's a fine line. And we really want to watch that line as well. And so that area will be definitely segmented off. But it's funny, when I talk to strangers, and I talk to strangers all the time, and I say, make video games for women over 30, murder and romance and erotica. And then the women just perk up. So whether people want to admit that they're reading it or not, they are reading it. And
I think they're definitely reading it. It's just need to make sure the logons are different for different people.
Yes, for sure.
I'm going to circle back to something and back to our previous episode with you guys, just for a minute for the listeners, and then bring us back up to here. Myself and Melanie met both Blair and Jean out in Long Beach, California at Bouchra Con 2014. For those who don't know what Bouchra Con is a huge mystery and thriller writers and fan convention that circles around the country and goes to other countries outside of the United States. As far as I definitely know, Canada. Toronto is coming up.
2017.
There you go. Thank you. And yes, I plan to be there. So, at the time, you guys were mostly focused on mysteries. And I know in our last conversation, you were looking at rebranding and expanding that list. And we've already talked a little bit about expanding into romance and erotica, in children's stories, which I really didn't mean to put with that erotica, sorry. I just caught that, sorry. Filter didn't clap fast enough. So what other areas have you been successfully breaking into, and what areas are you looking to break into still?
Well, it's the word successfully. I mean, we're still really, we've only had external people using the software, the engine, Story Stylist, for the last 2-3 months. Okay. So a lot of user-generated content is in the works. And since we've opened it up, and that was based on feedback that we got over the past year, is, listen, I want to write science fiction. I want to write steampunk. So right now we have... there's a story in there called Sky Carver, which is set in the future. There's a story that's about to be published within the next 2 weeks, Please Please, which is 300 years past, but uses some of the same people from Sky Carver, the same cultural race from Sky Carver. And, pardon me. And then we have some cyberpunk thrillers coming up as well. So I think what works really well within the game aspect of short stories and novels is what's the puzzle. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a mystery, but there has to be some element of, okay, so what are you as writers? Where are the points in which your readers can interact with the story? So with a mystery, that's pretty straightforward. I mean, there's the crime scene that you can check out. There are, maybe you're going to investigate, if you're a police officer or a detective, you're investigating people's homes. But when it comes to, science fiction, well, maybe you need to discover a couple of elements in the bunker, for example, to be able to combine those items to trigger the next portion of the story. So it really is having writers think of their stories in a much different manner.
Can you talk more about the trigger element?
Sure, from what perspective?
Well, I think it's pretty cool that there are things you can do in the stories that allow you to move forward. So I just wanted you to go more into that and how that works in Story Stylist.
All right. So in Story Stylist, everything is fairly easy to use. And then there's this one place where people sort of gasp and they freak out. And that's called Lewis scripting. And I'm going to talk about it because I don't want you to freak out. When we did our summer camps, not only did the kids take to it in less than an hour, the scripting part of it, but when I had asked them on the Friday after they'd been with us and developed their short game over the course of the week, I said, what would you say to people who are just looking at the engine for the very first time? They said, don't worry, it looks complex, it isn't. So let me just preface that. The idea with the engine, and if you look at the screenshots, there are people, places, things, relationships, conversations. These are all the building blocks of your story, and Lego bricks, as they were. In the scripting, you'll be doing things like, if player visits Joe's Crab Shack, and then they'll have the conversation with Joe. By having the conversation with Joe, I'm then unlocking a piece of information. So I've essentially triggered it. If you go to the YouTube, you'll see some of the YouTube videos that I've posted, which is how to upload a graphic, how to tag a graphic, how to start a conversation. It was funny because as I was doing those videos, I made a little mistake, which was a fantastic opportunity for me to show you how you can unlock something. And so unlocking can be done a couple of different ways. It could be information that is unlocked through a conversation or a visit to a location. So how could you possibly know the recipe to Joe's fabulous crab sandwiches if you don't visit Joe's Crab Shack? Right? That's not information. Just as you were reading a book, you wouldn't have that information until you got to that page. In Sky Carver, you need to collect 2 batteries and then combine them with the small device that you find in the first room. And by doing that, there is a script in the Lewis scripting that basically says, when they found those 2 batteries and they combine it, so there's a little combine thing, and then this little thing pops up. So that's the next series of videos that we're going to be doing, is showing people how you do that. I don't know. Oh, I think maybe another video. Maybe we'll work on that one tonight because I'm really super excited. Blair's been doing this thing where he stitched together a bunch of demo photos of a real house. So he's found pictures of this grand mansion. And the idea, when you go into a grand mansion, there's the foyer. Well, you can actually designate regions on a photo and say, oh, this is a door, and this will lead somewhere else. So you would just identify this is a door or this is a table, and please show the little hand icon. So when a player goes to put their icon or their mouse over that, it changes into a hand, and when I click on that, it triggers something. So there's all these little bits and pieces where it's a lot more work for a writer. This is not straight up writing a short story or a linear story.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Kathleen?
Oh, no. I'm pleased by the videos very much because I was watching them before I got here because I wanted to try using Story Stylist before I got here. So I think the kids were totally correct about it looks complicated, but you can get the hang of it if you just play around with it. Where I was before I got here was rooms. Rooms, I'm still trying to get get a grip on because I have a place that has 3 different places within it, and yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the things that Blair and I have not had a chance to do is to schedule live chats so that people can just come and say, hey, I need help, and then we'll just schedule a live chat. And any questions that you have, we'll answer, and we'll record them, and we'll make them available for other writers. Because chances are, whatever you're stuck on is what other people are stuck on, or we haven't clearly explained in the video and it needs a supplementary video. So we'd be happy to do that.
We've been talking about the details. For someone wanting to use this for the first time, other than listening to our first episode with you and listening to this episode, how do they get started?
Sure, they can go to onemorestorygames.com, and there is a Write Games button on there. And we're actually in the process of completely splitting the 2 websites so that the content creators have a separate website. And it's going to be really slick, and it's going to have, you have a question, pop it here, and we'll go make a video. We really want to be in service of the content creators because you're the number 1 audience for us right now, and I know the readers will come. So that answers your question, and the readers will come. It may take us longer than we had anticipated. We really thought that we were going to have a large audience at the get-go, but you need content to have an audience. Mm-hmm. And we have a contest that's going on right now, and we were hoping that people would be able to write us 30 minutes of content, and I think game designers are freaked out by that, whereas if I say 20,000 words to a writer, they're less freaked out by that. So it's finding that sweet spot of where can we work together as a community to find great content that gets writers paid, because we do pay the royalties, and is satisfying to the readers as well.
Go ahead.
On the royalties, do you care to let us know what the royalties are? So those out there maybe deciding to venture into this will...
Absolutely. So we're still sort of trying to finalize this. Currently, how it stands is we lose 30% of the transaction right off the top to Facebook, Google, and the Apple Store. Because if we want to provide our app, it's like the library, right? So if we want to provide the library on those platforms, then we lose the 30%. And then 20% goes back to the content creator. 15% is earmarked to help us lure and develop the content by these multi-million, the 20 million novels sold people, because they're bringing in their 3 million fans, which is, in a way, that's the marketing budget right there. And then the rest comes to One More Story so that we can maintain everything. How we would like to see this moving forward, we're in the process of discussing if we can track if sales are done on the website, then maybe it'll be more of a 50-50 split, because then we don't lose that 30%, right? Mm-hmm. So that would mean that authors would want to encourage their readers to go and buy it from the website, then play it on their tablets. But we have to be very careful how we do that, because those platforms could shut us out for doing that. So we're really trying to find what the best balance is.
I'm glad. I remember last time we talked, I don't think the applications are up yet. So I'm really glad you said that, because as you were talking, I just downloaded One More Story Games on my phone.
Thank you.
Yay.
Oh, I actually just looked for One More Story Games on my iPhone, and I couldn't find it. So how's it?
We're not there yet.
Not there yet. Okay.
That just saved me a trip to the App Store. I was going to go. I was starting.
Oh. Okay, so maybe it'll be up by the time this episode airs.
Yes, and Blair has actually been working also to get Story Stylist Mac available as well.
Thank you.
And it's, I know you're super happy about that. There's a lot of people. We have met 800 writers over the last year who really want to write content. And obviously it's got to fit in your timeline because sometimes people have a couple of projects that they've already got planned.
Only a couple?
Yeah.
But we definitely realized that getting the Mac development ready, and also for us to go back and polish some of our previous stories. Like, we published a story almost a year ago. So APOC is a game that we published a year ago. It was written by a police officer who used it as a prequel to his novel. Well, we've had a lot of incredible features that we've put into the engine since then, but that game doesn't reflect all of the really cool things. So it would be worthwhile for us to sit down and go, you know what, we've now implemented a little notepad so that if players are stuck and don't know what to do, they can just click on the notepad, sort of like the Idiot's Guide to Gameplay. And that doesn't exist in there. It would be really cool to take some perspective photos and have people be able to click around. So a lot of really cool things that a lot has changed even just since July.
Good.
As the erotic author, you were talking about possibly having the images. When do you expect to have the images ready for erotic authors to attempt to create storylines for you?
Very fantastic question. We are in discussions with them right now, which is super exciting. And hopefully, I don't know when this is going to be broadcast from the time that we've recorded this, but I would like to have an answer for you by then.
Should be, and I want to say the first week of December or right before that is my guess.
I hope to have an answer for you by then. They're very keen on working with us because I don't think that there is a game maker out there that is focused on, first of all, an adult audience as recipients, especially from the content side. Nobody's really going after writers. And we know that writers are great storytellers, so that's our focus has always been there. And on the player side of things, it's, yeah, okay, we could create content for kids. There are a lot of people creating content for kids. Let's create content for older people who enjoy watching great CSI, who enjoy reading great thrillers. And so, yeah, they're very excited to work with us.
Or as I like to say, the adults who haven't refused to grow up out of the kid stage. Real quick. In July, you talked about having a writing contest.
Yes.
I thought I saw something today on the website about another writing contest in December, or did I imagine it?
Yes, so the one that we had in July was a Write a Game contest that we were sponsoring in conjunction with another organization, and that was just do 10 minutes of gameplay.
Okay.
And our current website, or our current contest, is that writing 30 minutes of content, and top prize is up to $5,500 Canadian, which is roughly around $4,000 US. And the feedback that we've had so far is we're unknown. So people are scared to take the time to watch the videos. I mean, if you watch the videos, you know it's not a scary software product. And that that if we don't get enough entries, because it's how we structured it was, based on the number of entries, the prize would get bigger. So Blair and I are just in the process of deciding if we should just beef up the prize at the very lowest level. So if we only get X number of entries, the top prize will still get $500 Canadian. And then, so being a little bit more generous with respect to the prize money, but also maybe decreasing that from half an hour of gameplay to 20 minutes of gameplay. Because then people will say, you know what, okay, so maybe that's 15,000 words. I've got a story kicking around that I might want to alter and gamify, essentially.
Cool.
That would be awesome. I'm kind of intimidated by 30 minutes of gameplay. Just for the record.
I suspect some people might get into it and just realize their games are longer than they thought.
I was also thinking about that, but still.
Yeah.
I think you'll find that it goes a lot, that it's not that. Well, okay, I guess it depends on what kind of game you want to make. Is your game mostly narrative focused, where people are just clicking around and window boxes are popping up with large chunks of text? Or is your game a little bit puzzle focused where they need to collect certain elements and then combine them? So it is, in a way, we're sort of giving writers a crash course on game design. And as we move forward, we're going to have more resources. We'll have the podcast with game designers who say, listen, I'm a writer first and I got into game design, and here are some of the things that I've learned along the way that might help you.
Yeah, when I was looking around on your website, I was looking at the fees for using the software. Would you like to go over that for the audience?
Currently, the software is priced between 20 Canadian to 120 Canadian per year, and that mostly has because we need, as a startup, we're not one of those .com millionaire companies. As a startup, we need to pay for data and storage space. So most people are going to pay that $20. Some people are going to say, you know what, this is really amazing. I want to give you 120, even though I'm not using all that space just yet, but I intend to. We also work with writers. So we had a Kickstarter last spring that was not successful. However, some of those people who supported us said, listen, I'm not a game designer. I would like to purchase your time to sit down and storyboard our story. So one of the things that was on our Facebook page was a PDF of game flow documents. So instead of having a linear story where it's just a string of events, it looks more like a choose your own adventure. It looks more like a family tree where there are a lot of different options, or there's what's called a sandbox game. So, there are going to be some people who want to upload a lot of graphics. They're going to want to make things super, super pretty. They're going to have super complex games. And then there are going to be people who just want to make the 5-minute, maybe it's a 5-minute intro, a little teaser of your next novel that's coming out, as opposed to a 20-minute playable game.
I didn't even think about that.
So it's like you just gave your fans one extra way to access your storytelling.
That seems like a really cool way of getting publicity for stories if you have like little teasers like that. I never even
$20 a year is a cheap price for that.
Yeah, I thought the prices were very affordable.
And
I wanted to show.
And I would think if you've got, I assume, I know I should never assume anything. You've got an idea of how many times a game has been played, and I'm sure that the writer of that game would be able to see those numbers pretty quickly.
Absolutely. So we have an analytics system that's built into the software. And the idea is that, this might sound creepy, we can track every action that a user makes.
Oh, wow.
So from a player's perspective, we can tell what buttons they clicked on and at what duration of the game that they clicked on them, which isn't to like spy on someone, but it really helps us to be able to figure out, oh, you know what, they quit the game at this point.
Right.
Or at this point, they just started clicking on random buttons and they seem to not know what they were doing, which means there's a problem in communication. In that respect, when we make that information available to writers, they'll be able to become better game designers as well, because they're getting instant feedback. They know, hey, you know what? 98% of the people who read my story always pick this path. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, too, about the detail analytics, but the analytic of how many people have picked up this game, how many people have played the game. If I'm wanting to traditional publish a story, or traditionally publish a novel, I can walk in and pitch to Random Penguin House. Hey, I've already got 5,000 people playing this game. It's interconnected already to the story. Or if I'm a self-published person, I'm already building up my audience for my books, and my books would build the audience for the games. Mm-hmm. So that's really something fantastic.
Building on that, is there a way to send out announcements or advertisements to the people that have played your game specifically? Like, there's a new chapter, a new game by so-and-so, or a book based on whatever.
That's a very good question. Right now there isn't, but we are working on implementing that. I know that, like, for example, with Wattpad, Wattpad has built in their system. I don't know if you're familiar with Wattpad, Wattpad. I won't comment on it, but so what Wattpad has done is they have built a system where if you write a chapter, it encourages people to publish their content for free. Okay. Where we differentiate ourselves is you're not making just a linear story, you're creating interactive content, and some of you may be published and receive royalties. Not everybody, because we really do want to keep the caliber up there. And I've already forgotten your question. Oh my God, how did that happen?
Are you able to send out advertisements or
yes.
announcements
so
to people?
does that, and they send push notifications. So you can set up push notifications on your phone. So you, as an author, can send to your followers, and that's something where we'll be growing there as well.
Kathleen?
I've been thinking about fan fiction because if you're wanting free content, but I'm not sure, that's probably a publishing gray area.
Oh, yeah.
But related to fan fiction, one of the things that I love about Archive of Our Own is that if I want to follow an author, I can do that. I can subscribe to them, and then if they post something else, they update something, I'll find out immediately. I'll get an email. Is there going to be something like that, like that'll just go through the site, or would that be something that we would have to set up somehow as authors?
That's definitely something that we're going to implement into our system. Right now, we've just been focusing on the game publishing engine, but there is a social media component in there, and we envision it sort of being that one-stop shop for authors, and even having their own messaging boards, so that if they wanted to have their players or their fans come and interact with them, that they could do that from our website as well.
I am going to ask about fan fiction. Like, I know you can't get royalties from that, but still, fan fiction writers write a lot.
Yes.
A lot.
So, coming back to fan fiction and why we've structured our software fees the way that we have. So, how it works is best described as a play wall and a paywall. So in the Playwall space, there's no fee to play any of those games. However, One More Story Games has not, while they may have been published by Jimmy next door, One More Story Games has never looked at Jimmy's story. We cannot, do you know what I mean? Like we have not vetted that story. And on the paywall side of things, we have actually personally looked at the stories that have been created. We've tested them to make sure that A, they're playable, and B, that they're fun. Mm-hmm. One reason why we've structured, there is a maximum number of people that can view your content on the play wall, and it's 1,000. And that allows us to get around what's called fair use, which allows people to create their fan fiction. So if you are writing, I don't know, CSI or Castle Erotica, I'm sure there are lots of people who are doing that already, then only 1,000 people could ever see that. You know, it's, we need to find that fine line as well as publishers to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, but also our writers as well. Does that answer your question about fan fiction?
So, answer, you're saying some of it might be publishable on your free space, basically.
Yes.
To a limited extent.
All right.
Yes.
Different topic. Playing your game. I'm a very auditory person. I like audiobooks. So, when I'm playing your game, what I'm wishing for is an optional feature that authors can choose, namely text-to-speech. Are you putting, and also like musical backgrounds, are you going to be adding that?
Well, and that's another thing. When I look at the content that we have on there, that was before we even had multimedia available in the engine. So it's like, wow, you know what? That game would be so much better with a brooding soundtrack in the background. Mm-hmm. And so in July, that was one of the features that we implemented. And so now you can put in sound effects.
Excellent.
And you can put in music. And you can actually say, okay, so for example, here's something really cool. Say instead of a map, what you have chosen is a landscape. And the landscape, you took a picture in the morning, a picture in the afternoon, and a picture in the evening. As your story progresses, you could do a little script that says, when player reaches this point, change the map to the afternoon so that the position of the sun is a little bit different. When a player has reached this point in the story, make the map dark. And that could be for your themes. So right now everything is like one theme, but we're going to have the buttons look different. So if you're doing steampunk, it's more gears. But the idea being that you can essentially customize so much in the story imagine when you go into that creepy haunted house, all of a sudden your light jaunty music has turned into that really creepy thing, and when you put your little mouse hover over a door, you hear that. So there's a lot of opportunity to do that, and we haven't made use of those features yet. So that's part of the reason why I want to go back and revisit some of those games. Especially, like, for example, in APOC, there's a really bloody drive-by shooting. There's no reason why we couldn't have sound effects of a drive-by shooting in that moment.
Carly?
Are you going to have, like, sound bits and stuff that the authors can use, like, in an area that we can use to create this, or we have to find our own to put into games?
And if
Right now, you're going to need to bring your own.
Will there be
and
a
as we grow and get further funding, because we've done this, remember, we've done this all on our sort of like a small budget over the last 2 years. And so we don't have the templates yet, and that was part of the reason why we wanted to do the Kickstarter when we did. It's like we wanted to find the writer audience who wanted to commit to doing this to help us to get all the templates so that you could have a New Orleans template in there, and if you want to create stories set in New Orleans, there you go. Or Parisian 1910 Parisian story, or London in 2050. Well, okay, we're not there yet, but like to have all of these templates so that you could go and grab sounds and photos and themes. That's something that we want to provide for you guys. I should tell you about this thing. I don't know if we talked about it in the last one. The idea of serializing your story. So say you set your story in the sleepy town somewhere in Arkansas, and you had your sort of like your protagonist, and then you had several townspeople. So there's nothing to stop you from writing a 10 or 15 or 20-minute story using that setting, and then just clicking on the serialize button. The next thing you know, all your characters and all of that location information is transferred to your next story. What's also transferred is the player's choices from story number 1. So if I, as a player, I chose the detective character and I went in and I was really polite to Mrs. Johnson, and I might have been a little bit heavy-handed with Mr. Smith, when I go into that following story, Mr. Smith is going to remember, and I'm going to have to bring him donuts or something. So the idea that players' choices and players' agency impacts their experience of the story. So we're really asking writers to step up their game in a big way.
I was just thinking about another software program that seems like we've also talked about on the show. It seems like it'd be a really good method for plotting out a story that would then be made into one of your games. The software is called Twine and allows you to storyboard and do, multiple lines.
I'm very familiar with Twine. They've been around for 9 years, and we're trying to steal Twine's fan base, to be honest. And they're really entrenched in the community called interactive fiction, which is really great. I'm glad that there's a tool out there. They use it in high schools to teach kids how to do branching narrative, and I think for us, we're coming from it, and I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I feel like sometimes people in the interactive fiction community have looked at us with disdain because we want to monetize this. We want to monetize the software, and we're not asking for a lot. We're just asking for you guys to pay for the place for us to host it. With Twine, you create your game, and then you have to go and upload it and host it somewhere. It's not a one-stop shop. We're trying to give you all the tools that you need in one place. And I don't know, I think that there are people out there who feel like art should never have a price tag. And I don't subscribe to that. I think that if you are a great writer, you should get paid. And I think that we have created this environment of everything should be free and you should suffer for your art. And we fundamentally disagree with that. So why not bring a $20 or $120 Canadian a tool to to writers and be able to help them have a new promotional piece. So if they're just doing the trailers or having create stuff that's saleable, it's put some skin in the game. And if you want to take this from a hobby into an actual career, there's no reason why you couldn't do that. And I just don't know if Twine is really We're not perfect yet, but the direction that we're heading, I don't think I've seen Twine reach for those skies.
I would, from my limited perspective, agree with that. What I see is they're free, easy to get started, but learning how to do the advanced stuff is hard because you don't have the level of support that they might be able to have. People are paying for it.
True.
The good news about being a gamer is that a lot of gamers have multiple consoles in their houses. And you don't have to pick a side or pick a flavor. You can have some of everything.
Yeah. And you know what? We've had a couple of people come in who, I specifically asked for people to come in who are readers and not gamers. Like, they don't play social games at all. They don't even play Candy Crush. And watch them play and sort of get their experience of it. And when they finished even that short, the Mulcaster murder game, they were like, oh, is there more? And at the time, we only had the one game up. I'm like, nope, sorry. And they're like, I really enjoyed that. I loved being able to have, they loved the photographs. Those were all photographs that our staff took in Barrie. Some of the characters were stock photography, but they loved the realism. And I think there's space in the market for a lot of different kinds of interactive content. So some people don't care for the illustrations. They don't like the Skycarver illustrations. So I personally love them. Other people have really loved them. So there are going to be people who really like art. There are going to be people who love photos. There's going to be people who love the 5-minute games. And there are going to be people who want an 8-minute game. Like, can you imagine Game of Thrones as interactive content?
It actually came out from Telltale.
Yeah. And, I think in a way we're aspiring to become the Telltale for the everyday writer.
Excellent.
That's pretty cool. Sorry, it is.
No, I was
We
expecting more
weren't
questions.
making any faces saying that wasn't cool.
No, it definitely is cool.
Speaking of the support that was mentioned earlier, you had mentioned that you guys were going to do a few webinars to kind of answer people's questions and then post those to the site so that other people could get their questions answered if they were, How do you find...
it is such a challenging thing to be a startup because we've gone our staff has fluctuated from 3 full-time to 21 full-time. And it just depends on how many students we choose to take from the local college. And so sometimes things don't get done in the schedule that we would like them to get done. And I'm really glad that I did the new videos because I think they've only been up for a week. I think they more clearly explain the beginning of how to create your content. And I'm really looking forward to getting deeper into the nitty-gritty and showing people, listen, scripting is not that scary. As we go further, so there are going to be writers who get on board right now and they're willing to take the 2 to 3 hours of that learning curve to get in there because they know, listen, I'm going to have that great content out when they have their multi-million-dollar author on there. Hey, listen, that's where it's a really advantage. It's a huge advantage for somebody who comes on early. And then there are going to be people who say, I'm going to wait a year until they have all the shiny wizards, where I just click on the wizard and things happen and I don't have to have learned things. If a 10-year-old can do it, I'm fairly confident that those of us over 30 can handle it as well.
Speaking of someone that would want to do it now, I think if I can carve out the time to do it, I think I know already how I personally would do it, but what would you recommend? Having for instance, a rough draft of your entire story done before starting to gamify it, or to write as you're gamifying it?
That's a very excellent question. I think that you could approach it from both. And like, for example, I'm gonna go ahead and post that link again to the PDFs where it shows the branching narrative so that people can start to see, oh, okay, these are different elements that I can make. What are the interaction points for my reader? If you haven't already played one of our games, I think it's really important to go play. And what I'm excited about moving forward is we're going to be able to show more and more of all of the features of what's possible. Somebody right now is working on the sexy 90-second video of why writers should care. And it's hard to cram. It took us 90 minutes to show a writer all of the nooks and crannies of this engine. Like everything that you can do from, if I take a screenshot of our Skype conversation right now, I could put a little hover over David Allen Lucas, and when I click on him, he's going to have a conversation with me, or I can click on his black cowboy hat, and I'm going to put it on myself.
She's gonna steal your hat.
No!
Steal my hat. Yeah, steal your hat.
Geography
or
saves
maybe
hats.
I need to look on that bookshelf because I bet you there's a DVD. Are those all books?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all books.
Okay.
Except for the tarot
So
cards.
maybe one of those books is hollowed out, and there's a vial of poison in there,
I
or
like the way
some
she
hidden
thinks.
Snickers.
Just let you know.
Okay, we'll go with the Snickers, the tame version.
Oh.
So there's so much that I can do and play with. How do you want your audience to interact with you? You know, I always say, I'm going to be cheeky, like in an interactive erotica, well, what are the choice points? Think of it as all as one gigantic choose your own adventure. So am I going to this dalliance? Is there conflict between the characters? Are there items for me to pick up and use? Do I need to... Do you know what I mean? Like,
Down,
and
girl,
so
down.
I think that's true for all genres. Is there conflict? What are the events that are happening? What's the sequence of events? Like, for example, in a game system that's sort of like a sandbox style, maybe in an enclosed space. So say it's a house and you have to go room by room. Maybe you have to visit 3 out of the 5 rooms and take certain items that are in those rooms. Just by virtue of having done 3 of the 5 things, you have now opened, you've now triggered the next chapter. So, or maybe you have to do things in a certain sequence. It really is thinking, okay, so what do I want that player's experience to be? What do I want my reader's experience to be?
Speaking of that, if there's a sandbox type thing where you can pick up things in the room, how does the player know that things are able to be interacted with and not just a blank story? Do they just hover around to see what they can click?
Yeah, so one of the things that Blair worked on in the last month was being able to change the cursor. So for example, if I had, if my graphic was a perspective of a hallway and I had a table. I can't even think of the word table. So if you had a table with the flower arrangement on it, and if they put their mouse over top of that flower, it would either light up or the icon itself would change into like a hand or an eyeball. And the eye would be, obviously it would be like, hey, click me, and I will let you see things that are going on. If you hover over a door, it becomes a little door icon. Little things like that. So we are trying to indicate to people, hey, there's something here. And that's very traditional for point-and-click adventure games.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something that readers aren't used to. Like, if you've never played a social game before, we, as content creators, have to communicate to you, hey, there's some active element here that you need to engage with.
What?
I really want to create, right now, a romance game where if you don't flirt with characters A, B, or C when you meet them, you just go home and eat ice cream on a couch and are sad because you're single and the game ends. I really want
And you
to
pet
do
your
that.
cats. You gotta pet
You
your
know
cats.
what? I think that would be a great 5 or 10 minute little game. And
Can I
we could do that.
request-
We could
oh.
do that so quickly. And you know what I love about the whole idea of photography? Like with APOC, which is the drug thriller that was written by the police officer, he actually got all of his friends to be in the game. So they all, like, he got them all dressed up and had people be, like, the police detective, and he was, had his arms crossed, and he had this big grumpy face. He's like, okay, sergeant or captain or whoever it was, and he had his wife being a lady of the night at 3 in the night with a neon massage parlor sign behind him. So they had a lot of fun in the creation of the story. And so here's your opportunity to have fun. And there are going to be some people who say, you know what, that's too much work for me. But it's not just a story that you're writing, it's a whole experience that you get to create something from scratch. One of the recent features that Blair has implemented was the idea that, and I talk about that in one of the videos, that you can actually swap out character faces. So the idea that, so say you were taking photos of your best friend. She's a character in your game, maybe not the erotica, but she's a character in your steampunk game, and you've got her dressed up, and maybe you ask her to give you 5 expressions. One that's neutral, 2 that are varying degrees of happiness and ecstatic, and then somewhat grumpy, and then like really angry. The idea that as a player, when I engage in conversation with her character in the game, depending on the options that I choose, like maybe I choose to provoke her, well, that's attached to this thing that triggers her facial expression changing. So that's another way that we can have agency from the player to impact their experience.
So you could literally see how much a person likes you, because wasn't there rapport in some of them?
Mm-hmm.
Rapport is still there, and I think that there are going to be people who just use the rapport, because to come up with 5 different expressions for every character is a lot. Even with our own hand-drawn, like we have a couple of stories that have illustrated characters. Right now, given our budget, we're not going to have 5 different portraits for each of those characters. So you're just going to see the rapport go up or down.
So,
I'm still curious about what Jen was going to say.
oh,
No, it's nothing.
okay. We're changing subjects a little bit, actually quite a lot.
Leaving the red light district?
Leaving the actually I want to go visit the massage parlor, but no, I'm just joking. As I get slapped from everybody at the table. Real quick. We met you at Bouchra Con 2014. You guys have been going to various writers' conferences and conventions. What does 2016 look like for you guys? Where might authors in the world run into you?
That is a very good question.
And it may be too soon to ask.
It is too soon to ask. I mean, we're a startup, and I think that this is a very challenging space to be a startup. I don't know if it, like, I had a regular job. Blair had a regular job for the longest time, and I really missed that income. But as a startup, we're doing this full time, and so our resources have been very limited, and we've been waiting forever to be able to announce this author, who I might tell you guys after the recording part is over.
That's fine. I've got news for you, too, after the recording part. So go ahead.
Way to tease the audience.
Exactly.
We're hoping that will help us raise our profile and get more writers on board and start generating some more revenue. Or, with our stock photography company that wants to partner with us, that there might be some investment from their part. And that will allow us to be able to more efficiently serve the needs of writers by having a lot of templates. We've also been talking to some television shows for them to have stock art so that fans can make their own fan fiction video games.
Okay, you just made Kathleen Kathleen's almost jumping up and down here.
Yeah, and I might tell you about that once we're offline as well. And so there's lots of exciting things on the horizon, and I would definitely like to go to. Is Bouchra Con in New Orleans next year?
Yes.
Okay, so we would like to go to that.
I may see you there.
Definitely, anything that's sort of in closer proximity to us just at the moment makes it easier for us as a startup to go to. And then for 2017, we're definitely going to be at Bouchra Con Toronto, unless, we're not living here anymore, which is also a possibility, because we're kind of nomadic. You could be writing stories on the beach if you want to.
True. Very true. Mm-hmm. And for the audience who, obviously, since this is not a video that you're listening to, but an audio, you missed Kathleen making the heart shape with her hands about the idea of fanfic.
Jean saw it, though.
I think fanfiction video games is the next step of content creation for gaming. You're already starting to see the influence. You've got Minecraft has been out for quite a while, and so young kids are already used to the idea of creating visual worlds. The one thing that I saw with the kids who came in for the summer camp, their spelling and storytelling skills, they're not there yet, but at least we can start them thinking about storytelling in a way that is narrative focused versus visual. Mm-hmm. And you've got the Mario Maker that's coming out, or has been out for a little while. So what I would want to say to writers, first and foremost, games has now overtaken film, TV, and music combined as an entertainment medium. So we're really hoping that people are as excited as we are about getting into this industry with story stylists.
Well, I think the group here is once again excited, like we were back in July. You had your little reservation up?
I'm really excited by the prospect of being able to make a case like the kind that I can play on my phone for characters that I already love. Like, that is the coolest thing ever to me. Like, I can't even. There.
And you might partner, if you get permission from the studios, then you could have more than 1,000 players.
Like,
well, absolutely, and that's, to them, they look at that as just a marketing expense. It's to them, it doesn't cost them anything. It means that if you were a fan of a vampire series or a zombie series or a space series, it's like, oh my god, you mean I get to be on the Enterprise or Babylon 5 or whatever, and I get to create my own games? Like, how cool is that?
Play a game created by the actors themselves.
Yeah, and Blair says he's chiming in now that he's paying attention. I joke. But to be able to play games that have actually been created by, I don't know, maybe Will Wheaton wants to revisit the USS Enterprise and create his own micro games.
Yeah. And I know at one point these games came and went. They were run by, this one game I'm thinking of was run by BBC, and we couldn't play it over here in the United States. But they had a game connected to one of their shows that we call in the United States MI5. The name that was over in England, unfortunately, has a racial connotation here in the United States, so I'll leave that one alone. But the idea was you were trying to find a bomb. It's set somewhere in London, and you were having to do, just like what your game does, and go around and try and solve it. And it was something that was tying into their universe with a lot more independent now, not just networks, but a lot more independent entertainment. This might be also something that, in the long run, might come together.
Well, and with another $150,000, if we could raise that much in the next little while, we can make the player experience that much more sleek, so that it looks like the $1 Million Game Company. I think we look better than just your regular startup, but in terms of competing with those multi-million-dollar companies, we're not there yet.
Right.
But that's something that everybody who creates the content now gets to benefit from moving forward. A, they know how to use the engine before anyone else does. B, they start to build that rolling fan base of, say your challenge to yourself is to create a 5-minute game every week. So that might take you, well, it just depends. That might take you a little bit of time. That might take you 0 time to do that. And then, you know what, there are going to be people who say, hey, I can't wait for the next 5-minute adventure or the next 5-minute teaser, what have you. They're going to be excited and engaged with you in a different way.
Kathleen, you had your reservation R up.
Because she said 0 time, which is T.W. Findley's novel, and I was all... Sorry.
It's okay. One of the authors, she doesn't get to attend too often, but has written fantasy, and one of her books is 0 time.
You realize...
And I'm sure it's a really great book.
It is.
Unfortunately not under contract.
No.
Currently.
It has been published.
It has been published.
And that's the other thing that I would say to all writers out there. Do not give away the digital rights to your novels. Keep your digital rights. One of the reasons why we were able to negotiate the rights for this one particular author is because the rights have been returned back to them. Enough time has passed that they have the rights back to their stuff. And a lot of writers are, when they're starting out, they give up the rights for their TV adaptations and all of that stuff and film adaptations. But video games, the industry is starting to go and look for great storytellers who are novelists to convert their work now. So I think that's the next pool of talent that they're turning towards.
Well, TW, I think, has her digital rights, so be interesting to see if she'd be interested. She has a couple of books that she could gamify if she wanted to.
Yep.
I like the term gamify.
Yeah.
It's...
Gamers hate it, just so you know. I like it. I think it clearly explains what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a game element. And, just to point one thing out is, I think we're all language nerds here. I have an English degree, and I used to write snarky haiku. That's the limit of my writing these days. And when we think about the word game, we think about fun. And Story Stylist can be used to create gamified short stories and novels, but it can also be used to create content that has more serious undertones to it. You know, somebody asked us, could you create an interactive story based on my experience surviving the London Blitz? Or I'm doing a documentary on Japanese internment camps. Could I create an interactive story? Yes. Would I call those games? I don't know. I think that we have something attached to the word game that it's joyful and fun. I also think that people think of the word game, especially people who are over 60, they think games are for children. So it's a loaded word, and what we want to do is just focus on narrative and make narrative interactive, and tap into really talented writers.
From my point of view, for whatever it's worth, there's another industry that went through a lot of what you just described, which is the comic book industry. The term comic book, it must be funny, it must be whatever. You take a look at a lot of stuff, a lot of the superhero stories, there's a lot of social content.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was thinking about superhero stories and comic book writers using this engine. Like, can you imagine getting to be Batman for an issue? Like, that would be so cool.
We've had some very interesting conversations with people.
Oh, really?
So imagine having a template of Gotham where you have maybe 10 writers who are, one-offing. So this week, this writer will write content. And then it's sort of like, so that every week that you come back, there's another Gotham story. So we want to create this collaborative space for writers to work together.
Last question.
You've mentioned templates before, and in the Story Stylist right now, there's not one for St. Louis. Would users be able to create templates of their own, places?
This is a fantastic question. So what happens is, say you come along and you're like, hey, none of the templates here currently are my city. So I'm going to go and I'm going to grab some great photos of my city. So St. Louis, New Orleans, Chattanooga. There you go. So you have, as a content creator, created this great city. You've got all these locations that you've plopped on your map if you're using a traditional map. Well, what happens is you can say, hey, you know what? I want to promote this template, my own personal template. I want to make it available to other people. So we would then take that template and make that available to other people to use with your permission. Mm-hmm. So, yes, and that gets a little bit tricky when it comes to published content, because they would then have to pay you. We'll have to figure out how that works in terms of royalties, because at that point, if they're taking all of your photos, then they're not the rights holders of those photos. So that's a little nuance that we'll figure out and make sure that we build into the publishing side of things.
Cool. That is exciting.
Well, we'd like to thank you again for joining us, and we'll check in again with you maybe sometime early next year. See how things are going.
That would be great, and for those of you who want to stay in the loop, they can visit onemorestorygames.com. There's a subscribe button, and they can join our mailing list. I promise we don't spam, because I haven't sent anything out in 2 months. I'm terribly lax in that, but that's going to start to pick up as we publish new content and we start to announce the webinars. And as we split off into the writer side of things versus the game side of things, the writer stuff is going to have a different focus in their emails. Mm-hmm. And because we know, at the end of the day, storytelling is what sets us apart from any other creature on this planet. And we really want storytellers to get paid, and we want the people who are consuming that to value the work that you all do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, for the listener, tune in next week for yet another interesting concept in the writing industry. Have a great week writing. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Right Pack Radio would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their office. STL Books is a online bookstore specializing in new and used high-quality literature, children's books, and books written by or about St. Louis. please visit them online at www.stlbooks.com or find their store on the Amazon.com website.